Hi, everyone online. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. We'll get started soon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October Transportation Commission meeting. This is the official call to order. We'll run through the roll call. Let's see who's here. Brendan Cruikshank. Justin Denardi.
Good evening, Chair. Present.
Matt Eckhoff. John Hanson. Myself, who is present. Bob Kuhn. Bob, can you hear us? And Josh Stone.
Hello, present.
Hey, Josh. Great. So we'll assume Bob's here, even though we can't hear him. Other commission members, Lieutenant Ryan Turley. Mr. Bauman.
I'm here.
City staff, we have Stephanie Santana, David Lemke, Chris Fair. I don't know, is that everybody? Okay.
And Jim McCarthy from the City Council.
Yes, Mr. McCarthy. Thank you for reminding us of your presence. For some reason, you're not listed on the agenda, and I'm just reading it through. Preliminary general business. Public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not on this meeting's agenda. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to approval of minutes. We have the minutes from last meeting on September 4th. Is there any discussion, or does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve. Bob Kuhn.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. Anybody second that motion? I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Excellent. The minutes for September 4th are approved. Moving into new business, we have a regional plan update today.
We do. We have a regional plan update. Sarah Dector is here leading this effort for the city of Flagstaff. We have a nice little write-up and a link to some of the information she sent. I'll just turn it over to her to get us started.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Sarah Dector. I'm the Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Manager for the City of Flagstaff. I am going to pull up a presentation. Don't fear, it's not as long as it looks. I just like visuals. I have been working with transportation staff, planners, and a whole cast of staff at the city and county and our partner agencies on updating our regional plan for 2045. And that effort has been through several phases. We had a whole set of visioning workshops and art opportunities and informational work that we did in between 2021 and 2022. Then we really got started in 2022 working on creating a vision and goals and a collaborative process that was built around exploratory scenario planning. Then in the last 9 months, we've been working with a regional plan committee, which is why we haven't been to visit the commission in a little while. And that committee was appointed to help us write a draft plan. And now, just on Monday, they have endorsed a draft plan that will go out for where this little star is on our timeline for a 60-day public review. And that's why I'm here today, because we're going to be presenting to planning to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Bicycle Advisory Committee during this time period and seeking feedback from commissions on the plan. You're a little ahead just because you don't meet every month, but we can come back after we do this presentation, which lets you know what to do if you would like to review the plan or set up a subcommittee or however you would like to provide your feedback on this opportunity. So our plan committee, or some of these lovely folks are on the committee, and some of the people who are on the committee aren't in this picture, but they endorsed the plan on Monday. This group was about 25 people to start and ended up being about 20 towards the end. There's just natural attrition over a long period of time. They were selected by the city and county manager based on recommendations from city and county elected officials. They held 15 meetings of 3 hours each over 9 months. The meetings were open to the public and including some members of boards and commissions, and city council members came to several of them. Their process was to review a draft plan update chapter by chapter, and then in the month of August and September, they've been reviewing the whole document cover to cover. Their work has led us into this 60-day public review, which is a required part of doing a comprehensive update to our city's general plan. We plan that will start with advertising on October 20th. There'll be postcards in the mail and other things. On October 21st, which is a Monday, we will have an opening webinar. So we'll have a webinar that'll be probably much like the presentation you're getting tonight, so you get a pass, but you could send other people to this webinar so they can learn about all the things that are happening during the 60-day public review. Also, the public in November, we will have 4 informational workshops. One of those will be focused on transportation. We also are going to have office hours all throughout the months of October and November, where we are available as staff on Fridays, kind of on long lunch hour, for people to just drop in with questions and talk to us. And then this is, of course, the first of about 15 board and commission meetings that we will be attending during this 2-month period. The actual review period will close on December 19th, but we'll have a closing webinar. And the darker boxes on this timeline are what staff will be doing while the public is reviewing it. We're not done internally looking at the plan yet. And that's because the plan exists as a whole document finally for us to look at. But staff is going to be doing a case study and testing process where we're actually going to go through with the ideas of what we might have to apply this plan to in the future and take a look at it both functionally and how all the pieces might work together so that we are ready to implement this plan on day 1 of adoption. One of the ways people will be able to comment on the plan is something the city hasn't used before, but the county has been using for several years. It's going to be uploaded on a site called Conveo, which will allow people to interactively comment on the document together. So you're not going to have to send me an 8-page comment letter. You will actually be able to go on this website and put a comment bubble and see other people's bubbles, and collaboratively as a community, we can work on what you see in the plan. So that'll be a really interesting way. That's how staff has been commenting on chapters in the plan as we've been working on it. And we're offering that same opportunity to you and all members of the public. The plan is focused on 5 priorities, and these probably won't feel like a surprise if you've been listening to city council meetings for the last 2 years. It's very reflective in what the community has asked us to focus on. More housing attainability, denser mixed-use neighborhoods with varieties of housing type, which are the key on the land use side to supporting our active transportation plan. Reducing our climate pollution so that we can meet our city's carbon neutrality plan and improve air quality for the region. Also protecting our region's significant natural and cultural resources and making sure we're more prepared and resilient to hazards, especially considering climate change in our future. Tonight, I want to kind of pull out some parts of the plan that really tie to these 2 green ones, because transportation is a key part of how we achieve both of those priorities. The plan organizationally is going to be divided into some sections. There's, of course, our nice little intro and talking about the functionality of the plan overall. And then there will be a policy section, and the policy section is the part of the plan for people like me who work in planning and development services that will apply to discretionary development cases. So if someone comes in with a rezoning or an annexation, the policy section is what they will be looking at. The implementation section is really written more for staff and the doers of the plan, of what are we actually going to do to implement this plan? How will we be guiding that process forward? What are the principles that we're using to basically see the plan to implementation? The policy section has some things you're probably familiar with if you've cracked open the current plan, which are goals and policies, goals being our desired outcomes and policies being how we want to achieve those goals. It also has land use categories for our future growth illustration, which if you've ever come in for a land use decision and it requires some kind of change, the first thing planners do is we go look at that map in our current plan and we try and determine what area and place type you have. Those area and place types have become parcel level and now in the draft plan, and we're calling them land use categories because they really are just one thing that applies. It's little less mix and matchy than our current version. There are 2 parts of the implementation section, which we do not have in our current plan. One is guidelines, which are assumptions and corresponding principles to guide staff on how to work. In fact, every implementation strategy says implementing staff should, which is how you plan for staff to do the work. And that's really important because to apply a lot of things, just like in transportation, you'll see some things that are aspirational in our transportation goals and policies. We have to get those in code to apply them. We can't just wave the policy wand and make those meet it be part of the engineering standards. We actually need to get moving on adoption processes, which I know is part of the big shift, has been something that transportation staff and the commission have been talking about. We also have action items, which are really more like work program pieces that will help us follow those guidelines and get going on plan implementation. We've done another kind of split in the current draft that is our current plan has about 28 maps, and it really doesn't tell you how to use them well. So we've divided the maps in the document into 6 maps that we call policy maps. They actually the map itself tells you something about how to implement or apply the policies. And that's important for the transportation chapter because it has more policy maps than any other chapter. And then it also has implementation maps that are or informational maps that are just things like, so Josh, you're at Mountain Line. Mountain Line's permanent transit network is an information map because we don't decide in the plan what the permanent transit network looks like. The 5-year plan for Mountain Line does. So that map is on the softer side of things. It's more informational. And if, for instance, Mountain Line changes policy, we would want to be referring to the other document. But there are some maps that really the policy for them is set here. So a few of those that we carried forward without any changes, and these are all policy maps, are the existing and planned foots trails, the planned bikeways by class, and enhanced and grade separated crossings. These are also identified in the active transportation master plan. So we didn't make any changes to this. These just are the same carried forward. We have reviewed with staff and revised the road network illustration, which Stephanie was really key on helping us do the GIS work for this. So thank you, Stephanie. The current plan had created categories that were meant to kind of generalize the functional classes. They were called access, circulation, and regional travel. And there was kind of a Venn diagram in the current plan of how those applied. It also, on our current map 26, which is the road network illustration, it identified, or 25, it identified that any parcel that faced one of these access, circulation, or regional travelways could be considered a corridor parcel. But that was confusing because those areas also had other area types that applied to them. So we have pulled this apart a little bit. The state statute says that this map should show roads by functional class from the collector level and up. That's what this map is showing now. But we do identify on the new future growth illustration, areas that we call corridors. They are now at the parcel level. So for instance, this, I know it got a little covered up, but this brighter purple color, which you can see right here, is the corridors. Those are actually parcels that have access to an arterial or a collector that's commercial in nature. We are not necessarily then calling the road something different. The road is the functional class it is, and the parcels that have access to it that are not some other kind of area type or land use category get called corridors. So that's important to know because that got really enmeshed in the transportation chapter of the current plan, and we're pulling that back apart, putting the land use part in the land use plan, in the land use map, and then the functional class part will still be on the road network illustration. Do you have any questions about those maps? Those are kind of a big chunk. There's one more, but I'll pause just in case there are questions.
So these maps are just showing current roadways, or is this planned roadways?
It includes planned roadways, Chair, yes. So the dashed lines on this map are the planned future arterials and collectors. Anything else? Keep rolling. All right. Another map worth mentioning, because it was not in the transportation chapter in our current plan, it was in the community character chapter, which we no longer have, is a concept of great streets and gateways. Great streets weren't defined in the current plan. It's my favorite part of a term that has no definition. Or people who love document organization find that a little maddening, but it was real. But it was kind of each corridor that was shown as a great street kind of had a description of its current condition and aspirations. So we sort of use that to define great streets. And ADOT has recognized great streets. We know you look at this map and think a lot of these are under the state jurisdiction. But the 180 plan and the Milton Road plan both identified that those roads had a desired enhancement to their character and look and feel as places that was part of our regional plan. We didn't want to lose that, but we didn't want to necessarily keep all the great streets the same way we had looked at them previously. So there's some modifications to this map. Some roads were taken off and some were put on. And we've adjusted them really thinking about, and Jeff and Paul did a lot of this like back and forth with the staff. But my understanding from them is really this is based on where there's the most potential for these roads to be converted and have reinvestment in the next 10 years that might let us alter the way the street works and the way it appears so that it can be a more comfortable environment. The gateways, which are the little black circles on the map, those are really just areas of entrance to the city. So another area where a roadway might have some enhanced feature that tells you you have arrived and gives the sense of arrival in Flagstaff. At a lot of these locations, we have that big entrance City of Flagstaff sign with our founding date that you see by the airport and out on West Route 66 and at Beulah and Beulah and Lone Tree. And so, or I'm sorry, Beulah and Lake Mary Road. So some places like that, but there could be other things like art features or other kinds of signage that's not necessarily roadway signage, but that tells people you've arrived here, welcome to Flagstaff. So those are just the kind of things that are more character driven and placemaking driven. They used to live somewhere else, and so sometimes people didn't even realize they were transportation related, but now they are in the transportation section of the plan. Go ahead. Happy.
Yeah, sorry. So I have some questions. So I guess basic question, I guess, is like, how does this work?
Mhm.
But from the level of, I'm seeing all these maps here that are identifying current roads as well as future roads. We have current areas of like, we have current roads that people don't seem like there's issues with them in their current usage based on volume or construction. And so I guess like, does this plan identify changes to current roads, or is it more of just new roads, or like how does that current challenges with congestion or traffic volumes unsuitable to the characteristic of the road get planned out in this?
Well, the capital improvement staff does look at the plan and the map when it includes planners when they're long range planning, when they're designing a road or doing a project on a road. Especially if it's identified as a great street, we tend to have some conversations about this. Likewise, neighborhood plans might offer some insights into design expectations, which we only have two right now that really do that, which is Southside and Plaza Vieja. But the maps get used not only internally by staff as we are building a project. Like, so for instance, it can be used by Metro Plan. So if Metro Plan is doing a corridor study or operational study like they are on Route 66, part of their early documentation is to go through this plan and see what the community values and goals and expectations that might apply to their project is. Likewise, ADOT scans this document when they are starting projects at the planning level. That's one of their requirements as well. When it applies to development cases, that's when not only does the TIA and the work of transportation staff rely on the TIA, but it also does include discretionary decisions like rezonings and annexations, can also include a look at the future growth of the future road network and say, are you meeting our connectivity expectations? Are you realigning roads, or at least like meeting at a minimum what we're looking for going forward? And so we don't ever hold on those future routes people to the exact line. We hold them to trying to get that connectivity in a network that is similar enough and meets the same level of function.
So I guess looking at like the draft plan for future use, how is future land use and changes in volumes or use of streets accounted for in the plan?
So we did what we call exploratory scenario planning. And so our future growth illustration is based on what we called scenario E, and there was modeling associated with all of our scenarios. So the scenarios we don't go back and like model this whole map because it doesn't all come online at once, right? It'll come online at different times and different places. But we did model a scenario where we took the amount of expected growth between now and 2045 and we applied it kind of in a rough way to the map and said, what if it grows like this? And what if it grows like this? And we tested where we would get the most return, especially on vehicle miles traveled. So that was a real consideration on the land use side, is which of those scenarios helped us meet our active transportation goals, reduce VMT for the carbon neutrality plan, and also support shorter commute times. One of the things we found in exploratory scenario planning is if we kept developing the way we have been and not allowing for more infill development, that we would continue to push people to longer and longer commutes outside of the region, which is a trend we've already seen get started, right? People are buying homes in Williams and Winslow and then work commuting into Flagstaff, which is not a situation that was very common 10 or 15 years ago. So that trend could continue to the point where over 50% of our workforce is in commuting, if we are not thoughtful about the land use practices we have within the city limits. And so that's a real part of why and how this growth illustration was redrawn. It wasn't exactly the same as the scenario, but we tried to take the lessons from the testing of the scenario and apply them reasonably within the city and county of this area.
Thanks.
So I sent you in your staff report all the goals and policies that are going to be in chapter 3 of the revised plan. I just put this up here as a list of what the headings are because I don't think you want me to read you 4 pages of policies. But the important thing I think about these goals and policies, and it was really noted by the regional plan committee, is that it's moving away and giving more flexibility to staff, especially on the kind of metrics that you might want to be using in the future. We talk a lot when we're talking about the big shift on shifting to other ways of measuring and determining congestion and VMT. And so the current plan had like level of service information and all kinds of things that we just said, we need to do the big shift work, we need to do a master streets plan, and we need to let those documents be what is driving that conversation and not necessarily put it in the plan. So the big principles are in these goals and policies, but you won't find an LOS table anywhere in this material. It's not looking at the transportation system at that level. And it also won't get into the same level of detail as the active transportation master plan. But it does have some things that none of the other planning does have, which because of the great streets and then the last 10 years, what we've done with parking in the community and what we anticipate might come to be with parking issues in the community, we talk about streetscapes and parking. This is a section of the plan that the county doesn't really have the same issues in, so they are city-only issues. But we talk about street activation and we talk about placemaking on streets and traffic calming, and we talk about not only having managed parking districts like we do in the downtown, but very importantly, and it's in our action items, we talk about the need to start looking at year-round on-street parking and ways that that can be accomplished in the community. And that was actually an item that the committee felt very strongly needs to be a high priority item for engineering and public works and Park Flag to be working on in the next 10 years. We are very far outside of the norm. We actually had our intern do some research, and we are the only city besides Burlington, Vermont, that has the kind as restrictive of a parking ordinance in the winter as we do. Other cities have a whole host of ways they're dealing with parking. So we expect that this is the kind of things in the plan that might drive some projects that are going to change some of those things. As I said, there are these things in our later chapter called implementation guidelines. And what they're really supposed to do is tie together some of the other tools that transportation is using. So we've already been talking about TDM in Flagstaff since 2018. And there's now a TDM project manager at Metro Plan. And we have the active transportation master plan and a 5-year plan. And we have federal rules on road to zero. So really a lot of these are about pulling in those other practices and making sure it's known that they're understood under the policies. Some things that are unique in this section is that we really don't want to lose from the current plan the idea of having grid design in urban areas, increasing our connectivity, and minimizing cul-de-sacs and dead ends in the street system. I think that was a big part of the placemaking ideas in the current plan, but it wasn't as explicit as what we have put in the plan for the draft. We also talk about some of those temporary uses, the needs for ADA parking and the emerging needs for micromobility. The airport is an important transportation network. I know there's a separate airport commission, but we do talk about the needs for multimodal and transit services at the airport, of which there are a limited number now. And getting through all the other ways that the airport needs to fit into our other goals and policies. We don't have any implementation strategies for freight or rail, but it's kind of it is something we address, but not as fully because we're often, other than having truck routes and rail crossings, we're not always the primary on these issues. So the committee identified 3 priority action items for the transportation chapter. And you're not surprised to see that having a streets master plan is very, very important. They would like to see, they recognize the importance of taking all these pieces of the plan and figuring out how we're actually going to do it as soon as possible. So I know that is already a funded project, and we're looking forward to having the plan basically build a foundation that lets that get going quickly. As I pointed out too, alternative means of snow removal and operations to allow for more on-street and more year-round on-street parking and multimodal travel. And then for the county, there is, and I think it was even in the paper this week, that the Navajo Nation and the county are starting to engage with Mountain Line on rural transit services and how to fund those in the future. That's a piece that I know the representatives from Mountain Line, Estella, who's been working with me on a lot of the plan review, is very excited to see put as a priority item. So transportation has a pretty chapter, and most of the time when you're working in a staff, you just open the chapter that applies to you, but that's not how comprehensive planning works. And people laugh, but they know. There's a lot of interconnectedness with other sections of the plan and the transportation chapter. So a couple key things is that the growth and land use section does identify patterns and character of transportation infrastructure by land use category. This is an example of the kinds of illustrations we put in the growth and land use chapter of taking, basically an existing suburban area. This is kind of designed off of a spot in Flagstaff, but not too specifically, and thinking about how we create this into an urban center. So an urban center that would have, mixed use development, and what would the streets look like? And this street on this particular illustration is not something our current engineering standards would let us build, but it might be what we want to be building. And there's elements of it that we've certainly talked about in our long range planning before and in the carbon neutrality plan. And I know Carlton Johnson helped me crack out the NACTO guide, and we looked at pieces of this more closely. So we think this is illustrative. It's not something that is going to happen on every street, but it's the direction. It's meant to be an inspiration for the direction we'd want to see our capacity go and what we could be doing on streets in the community. There's also a section on cost of development because all those pretty street infrastructure are not free. And thinking about with our affordable housing plan, the balance between that and creating affordable and attainable housing and how we're paying for that infrastructure. And then thirdly, the energy chapter has a section specific, a policy, first of all, about electrification of buses, micromobility devices, and EV, and helping us start to plan for that transition to electric vehicles. It also talks about public access points to our parks, open space, and recreation in our transportation system, in our implementation guidelines. And then infrastructure and public safety particularly has 2 pieces. It has an informational map of evacuation routes, which the city has identified, but also identifies a need for the county to work and some rural places within the city to be working on the need for secondary fire access in case of evacuations. It tends to be that rural areas, and the county has not always required secondary access. And so there's some places where really it's one way in, one way out, and the need to kind of work together to find ways to create options so we don't have neighborhoods that get cut off during a wildfire event. So what's going to happen during the 60-day review? The 60-day review is going to have these opportunities for public engagement. That's all going to get wrapped up in December. And then staff will be analyzing and incorporating the public comments and the feedback that we've gotten from testing that we're hoping to do with several different departments. We're going to have the opportunity, if we need to reconvene the committee with if there are complex issues, but we also might elect to bring those back to commissions if it's not integrated across many different topics. If it's just really a transportation issue, we might be back in January or February with an issue that we'd like your help in resolving. Legal is going to have to complete another final legal review because certainly we wouldn't accept public comments if we weren't willing to make some changes. So that's part of this process. And then the document goes to a retreat of the Board of Supervisors, City Council, and the Planning and Zoning Commissioners from the city and county. This is what often gets called the citizen review session. But the plan is so big and it is so comprehensive that what happened in the past was they would have 12 or 13 work sessions in a row. And that really is a big time amount. And it's also a hard way to look at the document. If you're not sitting down and really looking at it in a short period of time, people kind of lose the thread. And I can tell you that the chapter by chapter reviews were sometimes difficult for the committee, and they were much more concise when we did the whole document review. We were able to get through that pretty quick. So this is a chance that those groups that are going to be the ones holding the public hearings on the plan will have to review the whole document. It might be up to 2 work days. The city is planning to conduct our public hearings first because we have to send this document to the ballot. And the county has said they want to, and they obviously have the option to change their mind, wait to see how the ballot initiative goes, and then they may adopt the plan as an amendment to their comprehensive plan as well. So with that, are there any questions for me about anything else? We stopped for maps, but happy to go back and touch on anything. Is any of this new to you? You've never heard it before and you're wondering how we ended up with this?
Hi, Sarah. I found your discussion about how we don't allow people to park on the street in the winter interesting, in that council has had first read on some zoning changes that encourage ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, to be added all over the place.
Mhm.
And they specifically say that no additional parking shall be required. And we didn't just dream this up. This was dictated by the state legislature to us. So that discussion about is there any way we can allow people to park on the street all year might be very pertinent. Thank you.
Right, Councilmember McCarthy, that is something we've been paying attention to. It feels that not only is there the changes that are currently being considered by council, but Tiffany Antal, our zoning code manager, is also working on changes we will have to make next year, which include even more restrictions on what kind of on-site parking and on-site requirements we can have for smaller multifamily dwellings. These are all going to increase the pressure for us to have on-street parking be available more broadly, especially in the winter, because people will not have it on site anymore. We've been doing that, but that can have a lot of. It also can be a way where the transportation system can support housing affordability, because every time we put a parking lot and require a parking spot on a site, there's less room for housing, and there is also a cost to build the driveway or the garage that then is passed on to the homeowner or renter. And so there's multiple reasons that are coming together. I certainly think that I have heard we are also expecting the legislature to even potentially move further to affect how we can set parking minimums, because they just think we're requiring way too much parking in consideration of affordability issues and costs of construction. So that could put pressure on our streets, and we're just at a tipping point where that's coming in the next few years. So we should not wait. That was the consensus of the committee, was we should not wait to get started thinking about that. I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun at the Transportation Commission.
Have they started looking at different cities and what they do with the snow and the parking? I know my nephew lives at one and yet, and you obviously understand it and you've seen it. They're allowed to park on one side of the street on the snow and then they gotta flip as they do it. Has the city started looking at that and planning that?
The planning staff, my planning staff, and really my intern did a survey of the 25 snowiest cities in the United States. And he did find that the odd even day configuration was the most common, but there are other methods that
Yeah.
get used. And he put a little report together, and I think we shared that with Chris. Did I send it to you? Maybe not yet. But I think we've shared that initially with transportation staff, but there are some other options for certain, but yeah, the odd even one is the one we found was the most common. At
Well,
least in
thank
the
you.
US. We're not going to get involved in that project. We're just going to hand off our research and walk away. To be frank.
Good answer.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I have more of a comment than a question. So I would just like to point out that I really like that image you just went past about kind of the visioning for ped bike infrastructure and enhanced crosswalks and say buffer zones between the peds and the cars and whatnot. Um, because maybe I missed it, but I thought when you were discussing the great streets, it was all about roadways. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that roadway includes all the ped bike infrastructure and how that works with the roadway. And I think we really do need to prioritize that. And when you used wording like more comfortable environment to describe the roadway, and I think you even said enhancement of character, that should apply as much or more to the ped bike infrastructure than the roadway. I agree that it needs to be for both. But I just want to encourage us not to forget the importance of multimodal transportation. So thank you.
And good clarification there, Brennan. I guess if there's no other questions from the commission, is there any public comment? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So I guess, Sarah, what would you like from us? Just specific comments? Do you want us to more formally review the plan in more detail, or?
I think what we'd like you to do is to review the plan in detail when it's sent out on October 20th. As a commission, several commissions, this is previously when we came around to commissions, I said, don't come up with a formal commission comment. Just give me your individual comments. But this is actually the time to come up with a formal commission comment. So it would be advisable if you wanted to see me back in December, or if you wanted to agendize it for your next meeting, to put together a commission approved comment to send in. We'll ask the same of the bike advisory and the pet advisory committee.
That sounds pretty reasonable to add that to our next agenda in December. Does that sound good to everybody else? And then we'll just have to maybe I'll try and make a note to remind everybody a couple weeks ahead of time to actually read through the document, so we're not all trying to plow through it on Tuesday evening.
I'll ask Jeff to send you out our notice when we send out the 60-day review start.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And a mid-November reminder.
And a mid-November reminder. Thank you, Jeff. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with you during the 60-day review.
Thanks for coming by, and thanks for your presentation. Next up is the capital improvements plan.
I'll stall while Trevor walks up. Yeah, so we have been doing capital improvement program kind of in the spring traditionally when it's mostly done. This year, we're just ahead of the beginning of the process. So Trevor is going to give us an update on projects in progress and what's to come for the capital improvement program.
Sounds
And
good.
I hope you've got it loaded.
Yep.
I didn't, thank you.
Chair, commission members, I am Trevor Henry. I am the Capital Improvements Engineer for the Engineering Division. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon to talk about our CIP, Capital Improvement Program, and then also do some project updates. So you've seen this slide presentation before. I was before you back in February, and we kind of went over the project updates, and I'll try to touch quickly on the highlights or the updates on ones you've seen, and then I'll spend a little more time on the projects that are relatively new. And then at the very end, we'll talk about the program and kind of how we develop it, the process, timeline, and then maybe go into some more details about why we do this. So here we go. So the first project is the Beulah University Realignment Project. And this one was developed under the old tax, which was Proposition 403. And then now it's under Proposition 419, which is the new tax. And you've seen, we talked a little bit about the budget already, but some of the highlights is we had a notice to proceed about a year and a half ago. And then we are expected to be complete this, or not this fall, but next fall, 2025. And as in the picture you see there, that is new. I sent Jeff an older picture, but this is actually hot off the presses. So this came in, and as you see here, this is the actual setting of the arch structures for the pedestrian tunnel that will go underneath Milton Avenue. So in the back, you see Burger King, and we're kind of looking to the west. And so these are being set. So where these gentlemen are standing is about the east edge of Milton Road. So they're making their way across. So I'm going to say in about 2 weeks, maybe the entire structure should be set. And then they'll start doing some more backfilling and then just get everything ready to go there. But that's the pedestrian undertunnel. And we're hoping to be done again kind of towards the end of October. And then the roundabout, which is in the west side, or actually we call that phase 1, that's substantially complete as of July. They're still working on some landscaping. They're doing some minor improvements and some upgrades there to get it ready. But as of right now, there's no traffic on that road as of right now until they get everything complete and get everything towards of next summer is when they should start looking at doing some opening of that portion on the west side. So that's Beulah University. And as always, if you have a question, raise your hand or stop me and we can talk about it. The next project is John Wesley Powell. So this again is out of Proposition 419. It's an extension of a road from Butler and 4th intersection going south and then connecting where it currently ends by Pine Canyon subdivision. And this project is going to be well, I call it a joint venture or it's a shared responsibility. 60% is on the property owners in the area and then 40% is for the city. We've talked about 45 million, but that's an estimate from a while back, but we're moving into a design process, so we'll get better numbers as we move forward. We're currently working on the design. We're going to probably keep working on that through the parts of next year, the early parts, and then maybe some construction later next year, and then possibly going for 2 more seasons after that. The good thing is on October 8th, which is next Tuesday, we will have a council update. So the team will be in front of the council to give an update on this project. And then one thing I did fail to mention was on the Beulah University, we will also be in front of council on the 8th for an update. So you'll get more in-depth information from the team for both of these 2 projects. Downtown Mile. So this project is it's essentially about a mile in the downtown section. It's real close to the railroad section. So as you know, our partners are the BNSF Railway Company as well as ADOT. So we're doing a lot of work there. We have a budget of about 56 million. And we've had some grants in place that have been awarded. So we're moving this project forward. Some of our partners are also providing funding to this project. So the update I have for you is we are at a 60% level design. We have sent out comments to our partners, and we're just waiting on comments to come back on the 60% level. And then we will just continue to move this project forward. We are also going to be looking into doing a construction manager at risk for this project. We're hoping to maybe get that going here soon, and then maybe the early parts of next year, maybe the spring, early summer, we can have a CMAR relatively close to being on board, and then we'll just keep moving forward to get portions of this project completed in 2025 and then the next 2 years after that. So as you can see from the picture, there's essentially 5 portions of this project. There's different phases, which is a Florence Walnut pedestrian underpass, the Rio de Flag pedestrian underpass, there's a shoe fly, there's the Milton Road Bridge. There's also some at-grade improvements with the railroad at Beaver in San Francisco, as well as the Amtrak station platform improvements. So a great project moving forward. We're excited for this one to continue on. Lone Tree Overpass. So this is the actual overpass is Proposition 420. But what we've done is we've coupled portions of projects in 419 with this. So we do this kind of jointly together. And there's an overpass portion, which is the purple blue here. And then the red going south is the corridor, which is 419. And then there's a portion of Route 66 that we're going to do here, which is also added. So this entire project is a corridor, it's an overpass, there's protected intersections at Butler and Lone Tree, at Franklin and Lone Tree, and then Sawmill and Lone Tree. There's also going to be bike facilities, ped facilities along this corridor. Currently, we are at 100% design, and we are going to start moving into some type of construction. So at September 3rd, the council meeting, we presented for their consideration GMP number 2, and that was 25 million. And that would provide construction from essentially the south abutment of the overpass going all the way down to O'Leary. So that should be starting in the early parts of 2025. We've been talking with the contractor. They're just trying to get all their subs in order, get everybody coordinated. And it seems like we're going to run into winter soon. So our best guess right now is to start next spring. So that'll be in 2025, and it'll continue for 3 seasons. Butler Avenue Complete Streets. I think when I came before you last time, we've called this the Butler Avenue bike lanes and protected intersections, but we've changed this project to titled Butler Avenue Complete Streets. And again, it's a grade separated bike facility with protected intersections, and it's from Milton Avenue all the way down to the very east side of Aspen Sawmill, the complex or the development there. We have a budget of about 12 million, and it's going to be coming out of 419. We applied for and received a Safe Streets for All grant in the amount of 9.6 million. And so the city had a match of 2.4 million. But earlier this summer, we staff submitted an application to the Arizona Smarts Grant Project or Fund, which comes from the state level. And that was approved at 2.4 million. So the city's portion is now funded by the Arizona Smarts. And I believe Councilmember McCarthy was there to support us on this effort. So we thank him for doing that. Did you want to say anything, Councilman?
Well, yes, I represented the city at a state transportation board meeting. We also had people there from Metro Plan and some other people from the city, and we got to 2.4.
Yes. So this project is completely funded. So the city's match portion goes back into Proposition 419 and we'll kind of use that accordingly and as needed. So the update we have is we are currently trying to get signatures from the Federal Highway Administration. They are going to administer the Safe Streets for All grant. And so we're working through getting the agreement executed. And then once we get the green light, we can do a design RSOQ, a request for statements of qualifications. That will start the design effort. And we're hoping to do that later this year and then most of the early parts of next year. And then we'll just continue with the design until the end of 2025 and then possibly doing some construction at the very end of 2025 and most likely into 2026. Butler Fourth improvements. So this is east of I-40 at Butler Avenue, right there in front of Little America Mobile, going all the way down to past the intersection of Butler and Fourth, all the way to Sonawa Heights, the very west end of that subdivision. And so this is a complete street. As you can see on the picture there, we're going to have 2 lanes in both directions with a median. We'll have the PED bike facilities on the outside. And we're also going to do some underground improvements for storm drain, water, and sewer as needed. And right now our budget is approximately 18 million. We did go through a RAISE grant submittal, an application earlier this year. We found out around May that we were not successful. But we went through with the Federal Highway Administration. We kind of got a debrief on our grant submittal, on our application. And we are going to be eligible for the second round of the RAISE grant. So we will be doing that at the first part of next year, so January. We will be back in the mix for a RAISE grant. And if that goes through, we'll be looking at about 20 million, 19 million for a RAISE grant, and then the rest will be city funds of about 10 million or 9 million thereabouts. So that's kind of an update on schedule wise. And then we'll just continue to work on our design through the later portions of 2025. And then we're hoping to get a construction manager at risk on board maybe around the summer of 2025. So this project will continue to move forward. And then construction will be late 2025 and then possibly into the next year and then possibly maybe early parts of 2027 being completed. So that is the Butler Fourth improvements. And with this project, we are also going to change the name to Butler Fourth Complete Streets. So that'll help us with that RAISE grant application. I believe there's a hand up.
Yes, Trevor, thanks for your presentation so far. I had a quick question about the roundabout, or roundabouts with this project. I believe there was some discussion about a potential ped bike underpass for at least one of the roundabouts. Is that still in the planning?
Yes, Commissioner, that is the plan at Butler and Fourth.
Okay.
So as of right now, that is planned for a roundabout. It'll be a 2-lane version of a roundabout. We're still going through some geometric designs and consideration and criteria. But basically that intersection has to be raised about 12 feet. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in an underground tunnel, which will be for drainage, but we're also going to make that a pedestrian crossing. So it'll be a shared use. The actual drainage portion could be possibly 2 feet lower, and then there will be a walking path next to that. Now, when it's dry, they definitely can use that crossing, but if it's flowing full, we'll still have at surface grade crossings with the roundabout. But there will be that option for a tunnel to be a shared use. Did that help?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. Keep moving. Lockett Cedar Fourth roundabout. So this is a highway safety improvement project through that program. We are working with ADOT. They are going to administer this project. It's a modernized roundabout in this intersection. As you can see on the slide here, it has lanes coming in, lanes going out. We worked quite a bit with our designers and with staff to get this to the final configuration. We've had a lot of discussions at the city council about PED crossings and beacons and Z crossings. And Councilmember McCarthy was very instrumental in getting the Z crossings added to this project. So right now we have a budget of about 6 million. And the city share is 4 million. That's already been sent over to ADOT. They have it in their coffers. They're ready to administer the construction portion of it. Right now, it is out on a solicitation. The bid will close at the end of October. We'll know in the beginning of November who our contractor will be. We'll be talking with ADOT. And we'll just get coordinated. We'll have our own project manager on board to help deliver this project with ADOT. And construction will start next spring. And we expect that to be a one-season project. Schweitzer Canyon Trail. So this is part of the FOOTS master program or the master plan. And this has been on the books for a little bit. We've gone through one alternate delivery method, which is a JOC. It came in a little high and we decided to redesign. We're going through that right now. And we're kind of working on that. We're expected to be complete with that redesign effort in a couple weeks. And then we'll get that out for bid solicitation through the winter, and then we'll open bids, and then we'll be in front of council for an approval. And then we'll start construction in the spring of 2025. We do have a budget of 3.25 million, and that was actually raised or revised to reflect what we did earlier with the JOC, the alternate delivery method, to ensure that we have enough funds to cover this project for construction. And again, construction will be most of 2025. So, go ahead.
Have you guys figured out the connection to Cherry, or whether you can connect it down to 66 at that end?
So that, Mr. Chair, that portion of the project is not, that scope is not with this project currently, but we have been talking, we are aware that there is a need for that, and that may be coupled with the Lone Tree Overpass, or it might be a project on its own. But that portion connecting to Route 66 is not part of this project. But we are aware of that. Thank you. This is a new project, Country Club Oakmont. So this is going to be a new project for fiscal year 25. And it's an intersection control project. We're going to do some evaluations. So here is Country Club Oakmont, golf course here, driving range. What is shown highlighted in yellow is essentially the project limits or the parameters. We're also going to have some underground infrastructure with it. We're going to analyze and see what we need to do there. We'll also have some bike and ped improvements. There is a foots trail to the north that stops near FAC. And we're going to be looking into somehow maybe extending that a little further south to connect into this intersection. So those are the scope of the project. Our budget is 2.2 million. It's coming out of 419. And right now we're going to move it forward with a 15% feasibility study. We hope to have that maybe completed by the summer of next year. And then based on that feasibility study, we can actually start looking at a design, which will start next fall and then maybe go through the early parts of 2026. And then for the construction season of 2026, we can begin. But this is a new project. We're excited to be working on this, and we have that internally with our capital improvements staff. Boulder Point Traffic Calming. So this project developed from discussions and believe with public neighborhood comments to the Transportation Commission. So this project is traffic calming and pedestrian improvements in Boulder Point. And then we also added to this project, improvements in the Brandon Homes area, more specifically off of Woodland Drive and Trails of the Wood, Trails of the Wind section. And Mr. David Lemke was our project manager. He is with the transportation section, but he stepped in and helped us out in capital improvements to deliver this project. And we were very excited to, it was an enjoyment working with him and getting him up to speed on what we do in capital improvements. So thank you, David. Notice to proceed was in June of this year, and then August 29th, it was completed and accepted. So this project is complete. Smoke Rise and Highway 89. This is a signal and traffic management project out of 419. And this is going to rebuild the signal at Highway 89 in Smoke Rise. So there will be some new improvements to the signal at all 4 legs. There will be some pedestrian improvements, crossing, some ramp improvements, as well as median improvements. So currently the medians are a little wide, so when the 2 vehicles come together, they can't quite see past each other. So we're going to do some improvements to those medians to ensure that they can offset a little more so they can see each other or see past the cars that are coming. And I've learned all of this from David Lemke again. He explained a lot of the nuances and what we're going to be doing with this project. And again, David is PMing this project and he's moving it forward. So we're again really thankful to him. Budget is a little under 700,000. Design is currently in place. We'll probably go into next year, spring, and then hopefully do some construction next year during our season. So that's a really exciting project moving forward. And then grant projects. So we do have some grants. That's kind of been the flavor of what we're doing now these days, first part of this year is looking into grants, funding mechanisms for city projects. And so with the program, we have Safe Routes to School, we have a master plan for Safe Streets for All and Vision Zero, as well as the first mile and last mile. So these are projects that were identified out of the CIP for streets and transportation. And a lot of these projects are kind of moving forward. We have a solicitation in progress for the Safe Routes to School. It is a transportation alternative grant. We had a pre-proposal meeting yesterday, and we're going to have a bid opening on October 15th. So we'll see who's going to help us deliver that project, and that is also in coordination and association with MetroPlan. The master plan for the Safe Streets for All, again, is also with MetroPlan, so we kind of working with our partners on those 2 grants. First mile, last mile, we are working with Mountain Lion. They received the grant for these improvements. And it's currently in design, and we'll continue to move that forward. We have a construction manager at risk on board who is Kinney Construction Services. They are a local firm. And we'll just continue to move that, and then we'll maybe have some construction elements, some bundled projects starting next year, and then possibly for the next 2 seasons after that. So those are the grant projects. I'm happy to answer any questions on those, but I may need help from the transportation staff to fill in the gaps. So those were the project updates. And then the next couple slides are about the program, the capital improvements program. So maybe a good time to stop if you have any questions on projects. Okay, hearing none, let's kind of dive into the capital improvement program. So you've seen some of these slides before. I've talked about them previously, and there's some additional information I wanted to present and just kind of, as I've learned this program, share with you what I know and just kind of help as we go through. So the capital improvement program is a short to long-term look ahead. And what that means is the current CIP is a 5-year. It's the current fiscal year and the next 4 years. And so you look currently at what's planned or programmed for the current fiscal year, and then you look at what's in the next 4 years. So you might have a project that is identified in year 5. So you know that's kind of the outlook years. So a long-term look ahead. It also identifies and you get an idea of when projects could be planned, designed, or constructed. So there's that identification process or idea related to the program, to the CIP. And then it also talks about budgeting and resources, planning decisions and coordination. So what we do is if we have a project that needs a partner or we have it within vicinity to a partner, we have to do some coordination. There's some planning efforts, some decisions that have to be made. So as we get closer to the project, if it's in the out year, the third out year, we know we have to start maybe building those relationships now, and then we start coordinating and working together. And then the budgeting part of it. If we have a project that needs to be complete or completed right away, we have to find the budget. If we can think about it in 3 years, maybe we have a little bit of time to build our budget. So that helps with that budgeting purposes and resources. With capital improvements, we have 8 project managers, and sometimes we may be a little full, so we have to determine what is going to work best for our resources on how those are planned. Some of the other aspects of the CIP is integrity. For me, it's about it being whole and complete. When you have your program and you look at it, you know it's complete. Not much is going to change unless numbers change or when the project is going to be planned or programmed. It could move in years, but essentially it's whole and it's complete for that purpose. It's got to be reliable and accurate. So cost, schedule, and scope. When we put those numbers, when we put it scheduling, when we know the scope, those have to be accurate. They have to be reliable. We need to let people know how the CIP is going to move forward. And it's undisputed. So if you bring a project to someone in the CIP, it's $1 million. That's pretty much what we've settled on. And that's what we can share with our partners. That's what we can share with the community, and ultimately we share with the council. That is what the CIP is it's undisputed. That's what it is in writing. That is staff's best guess and what we've put together. Resources. So that's the part I wanted to talk a little bit about with the CIP that I've learned in the last year and a half. In capital improvements, we're supposed to have 8 positions, 5 seniors and 3 project managers. In the last year and a half, we were down 5 positions. So when we only had 3 PMs working on our CIP in streets and transportation. In the last 2 months, we hired 3 positions. So now we're up to 6. So we are still down 2 positions, but we are managing the resources better. That's why we got a few projects moving forward, a few new ones. And that's why we've asked David's help on a couple of these projects. So staffing and resources is really important when it comes to the CIP. So that's kind of a little bit about definition wise and kind of how we build the CIP. Some of the priorities, I bolded the 3, which I've found to be the most top 3, I guess you could say: core services, community needs, and support services. Every year we have a retreat. We go in front of the city council and we present the CIP. And essentially these 3 are the ones we talk about the most. And so there's also bond, proposition, voter approved projects, public safety, grant funded. Like I mentioned before, grants are really important now. That's kind of a great funding mechanism. So those are kind of going to the top as a priority project. There's also boards and commissions. Again, I mentioned the Boulder Point project. It developed, spawned here from the Transportation Commission, and it moved forward and it was completed. So those are some of the priorities when it comes to the CIP. And then timeline wise, so every year, today's October 2nd. So we are going to be starting to talk to project owners, to project divisions, to see what their new requests are, to see if there's anything that has changed. So we start that now. November and December, we start to reconcile amounts or estimates. We take a deeper dive and we figure out if we need more money or maybe we have a surplus because scope changed. And then in January, we actually make the request to our finance section. And that is very important because that establishes what they go forward with the CIP as they move into April or March when they get with the city council. And then we present, and then ultimately they approve the CIP as requested. We also talk about the 10-year plan. So there's another document that shows projects a little further out, past the 5 years. So all of that is taken into consideration in January. And then March and April again, we do our retreat. And then we also do the final budget retreat with the city council. And they approve and accept what we've provided as part of the CIP. And then in June, the city council adopts the budget, which includes the CIP. And so then that process ends. And then about 4 months later, we start again. And so that's kind of the timeline for the development of the CIP. So that was kind of quick, but just trying to make the most of the time we have here and happy to answer any questions. I appreciate your time and I think I was able to do that in 30 minutes. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Henry. Are there any questions from the commission? I guess I had a couple of questions. It would be interesting to understand how much of like, I guess, is what's holding us up like people or money, like from like how much money comes in from 419 every year, how much money goes out from 419 every year, and is that the limiting factor, or is it just like having project managers because we have so many projects going on?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So that is, it's not totally resources related. It's also budget related as well sometimes. So there could be a time where the surplus or the revenue that's coming in off of 419, it can fluctuate. It can be a little more, it could be a little less. But when we did Proposition 419 in 2018, which then was voted on in 2020, there was a projection at the end of the 20-year sales tax. And that kind of helps generate or gives us a good idea of what the budget will be and how that will continue forward. So that's the little portion that, let's just say maybe the projections aren't doing as well. So maybe we got to pull something back or we got to push it to out years to let that fund grow a little bit. But then the big thing currently is resources. So we just don't have people to deliver projects. So that becomes a real difficult part of it. So I'd say it's probably 2/3 resources, 1/3 budget-wise when it comes to pushing projects out or delaying them or canceling them in whole. And then, or maybe adding them to a different project, making a bigger project out of 2 projects, essentially. Did that help?
Yeah, thanks. Is it possible to people do like project management as contracting for like project-based stuff, or like we really just need to have people in the city on city staff to do some of this project management as well?
Yeah, thank you Mr. Chair. Yes, we could always hire consultants to help us with project management, but you do pay a little bit of a premium on hiring outside because there's the overhead, there's the administration portion. So you're going to pay a little bit more for their help. And so that takes away from the project itself because that's how we fund staff time. That's how we fund design and other acquisitions and just anything related to the project comes out of that budget. So if we're going to be hiring consultants, resources, it's going to take a little more out of the budget for everything else.
It seems like there's a trade-off curve for big projects between like cost of materials increase to delay a year versus increased costs for a project manager. But yeah, it's just I see a lot of really exciting projects coming up and a ton of construction. And I'm just really hope that we're able to execute on all of it.
That is our plan, is to make sure we move this CIP forward. We are currently, as I mentioned before, we have 2 positions available. We're trying to finalize one of them. Hopefully tomorrow we get a little better idea of if we can fill that position or not, but definitely moving forward, and our plan is to deliver the CIP as approved and adopted by council.
Any other questions from council? Not council, commission? I think there's still no public here, so no public comment. Great.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Mr. Henry.
(2024) Leader of the Year at the city. How could I not?
Next.
Next up is David Lemke with the Foxglenn Traffic Calming, which I think is a brand new item for us here. I think it is. So yeah, we've got a good PowerPoint, get you up to speed, and some options to talk about. Our next neighborhood traffic calming project.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chair Koenig and Commissioners, for this opportunity. My name is David Lemke, and today I'll be presenting on the Foxglenn Traffic Calming Project. So just a little bit of background. Foxglenn Street is in East Flagstaff off of Butler Avenue. On the map on the left, you just see an outview of the city. Here's Interstate 40 in the pink, and the red star represents where Foxglenn Street is. On the picture on the right is just an aerial view of the street. Butler Avenue is to the south and Foxglare Drive is to the north. So citizens in the Foxglenn neighborhood came forward in the spring of 2023 with the following concerns: speeding, volumes of vehicles, children crossing the street. We went out and did a traffic study and did find that it met the thresholds for our residential traffic management guide as far as speeds. The 85th percentile speed is around 31 miles per hour. And there's also a concern about pedestrians crossing at Deer Crossing. There is a school, 2 schools. I think there's 2 schools in this area, maybe 3 altogether. And there's a gas station, the Maverick, down near Butler and Foxglenn. And they were saying that a lot of students and a lot of people were crossing at Deer Crossing to get to different amenities. So we went and studied, and we did find that there were 14 pedestrians in the peak hour, which was a little less than what we require for a crosswalk, which is 20, but it was something that we considered and something I wanted to bring up. So once we had the results, we wanted to do a neighborhood survey to understand how the neighborhood felt about certain items as far as traffic calming went, also to get more people in the neighborhood involved, because in the past we would do traffic calming projects and we would only have a few individuals and the rest of the neighborhood wouldn't be as involved in the project. So we wanted to try to get as many people involved as we could. And from the results, we found that speed reduction was consistent across the people that we surveyed. You can see that in the first graph, 71% of the people surveyed felt that it was a significant importance. They put a 5 for it, and that safer crossings were also of significant importance to the people who did the survey, as well as comfortable biking facilities. So weighing the options that we have, traffic calming is complex in Flagstaff, mostly due to our snow operations in the winter. And we also strive to make a comfortable facility for bicycles as well as pedestrians and vehicles. So balancing all those things, we're recommending a pedestrian refuge island at Deer Crossing Road and Foxglenn Street. This can also help accommodate the crossing issue that that was brought forward to us. So a lot of people are crossing at Deer Crossing and they want a more comfortable crossing at that location. Putting the refuge island will have a speed reduction effect in that general area. It won't affect the entire section of the roadway, but with the budget that we have, which we don't have a dedicated funding source for these projects, we believe this is the best that we'll be able to do at this location. And it's what we're going to be going forward with as a recommendation. This is a drawing of the proposed solution. We have Refuge Island on the south leg of Deer Crossing and Foxglenn, different striping patterns, narrowed lanes, and there'll of course be pedestrian signage to show that pedestrians cross there, as well as a painted crosswalk. So due to the required curb ramps for the crossing, we do suggest that no temporary measures go, but we go all the way to construction. It would be hard to do this in a temporary fashion because if we painted the crosswalk, there wouldn't be adequate curb ramps there. And so if we do go forward with this, we recommend going all the way to constructions. But in our residential traffic management guide, the next steps would be to gather public input during this meeting, which unfortunately it doesn't seem we'll be able to get much, which is unfortunate. But we do intend to send out this design to the houses adjacent to this area to get their approval for putting this in. So it's kind of a new step in the guide that we haven't had the chance to do yet because a lot of the other projects that we visited in the past were further along in the process that we weren't able to do this step, but this is something that we want to do. So we have a general design. We do want to get feedback from the commission on their thoughts on it. And then we do intend to send it to the neighborhood for final approval before we go forward with trying to bring this to construction. And with that, I'll open it up. I guess I'll stay on this slide, the actual design, see if there's any feedback from the commission, and yes, go from there.
David, I don't live in that neighborhood, but I live right above there, and I ride my bike probably 4 times a week down there. And there are a lot of bicyclists through there. Make sure that's safe where you come down there through the bicycling on that because of the speed. But hopefully you'll slow people down.
Thank you. Yes, we've met with our multimodal planner, Martin Ince, extensively for this to make sure that we're accommodating bicycles as best we can. He recommended that we put a buffered bike lane, like painted buffer, in this general area where the transition happens, and also use a wider bike lane. Typically, our bike lanes are only 4.5 feet wide. The one at this intersection will be 5 feet wide with green paint.
And no parking, right, David?
Yes, no parking right near the islands. That's one thing that we'll have to talk to the neighborhood about because we are taking parking within the first 100 feet about of this intersection. A lot of the houses that are on this intersection do have parking on the side street, but it is something that we will have to bring forward to them to see if that's something that they are willing to accommodate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, David, thanks for your presentation. Could you possibly just go back to the current view of the road just so I can get a better feel for the changes that were made?
Definitely, yeah. So this is the current condition, and the crossing would be here at Deer Crossing.
Right. Okay. And then could you go forward, I think 1 or 2 slides, because what was there a close-up view of that road? Yeah, right there.
Yeah,
is that close to the intersection there or not?
This is a little bit north of the intersection where we would
Oh,
do the
north of the
improvement.
intersection.
Yeah,
But that's the current configuration, parking on one side, bike lane on the outside of that, and then the 2 lanes.
correct. Yep.
Okay, all right. And now if you could just, yeah, if you could go forward again, sorry.
Sure. No,
To
absolutely.
the proposed thing, just so, all right. Okay, yeah, thank you. That just gives me a better feel because I don't get through there very often, so I don't know that road very well.
Certainly.
All right, thank you.
Hey, David, where's the bus stops here?
Yes, the bus stops are just at the edge of this picture. I tried to keep that about the same as it is today, so the buses will have a place to pull off, and then the rest of this will be outside of that influence area.
Can you clarify what like that refuge island, is that an elevated chunk of concrete? Is that just paint on the road? Like what would that experience be like?
Yes, it would be an elevated concrete structure similar to the island. There's one on Sparrow, I believe, just I guess I might be able to actually see it from this map. But up Sparrow near Northland Prep Academy, there's one that would be similar. And I believe we have similar ones on 4th Street. But exactly what it will look like is still kind of open to interpretation. Like we haven't gotten so far in the design where we know exactly like what the curbs will look like if we use rolled curb, if we use vertical curb. We lean more towards rolled curb because of the snow operations. But yes, it would be a 6-inch curb.
Will it be wheelchair compatible or will it just be
Yes, it would be wheelchair compatible. Yes, the in the picture down here, this would be at the surface level of the road, and so it'd be bordered by 2 raised concrete like islands, kind of.
That looks good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And of course, we would also be doing the curb cut. So I drew on the bottom half, like we'd have to put in a brand new curb cut on the south portion, but at the north portion, our plan is to retrofit it in with the current Apex ramp, because I believe that one is newer and had been put in recently, and we would want to avoid demolishing that and try to make it work with the design as much as we could.
One other consideration, about once a year or so, the water basically floods the entire street. And so I'm assuming there's gonna be like some signposts on that curb as well, just so that if it's flooded, somebody doesn't just drive right into the curb.
Yes, no, at the curbs, there would be a pedestrian crossing sign with an arrow. Yep.
David, are there any thoughts to putting, say, a prominent crosswalk markings on Deer Crossing? Because I would assume some people will cross from north to south on that road before then taking the pedestrian crosswalk across Foxglenn. Because right now, at least in the image, it looks like there's no crosswalk on Deer Crossing.
That's definitely something we can consider. We typically try to reserve crosswalks for where they're most needed. And I understand that if people are crossing at this bottom one, they could also be crossing to the north, but I believe we're comfortable without putting one there because the vehicle traffic is less, but it is something we could consider.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what would this plan look like? You're gonna email us out for public comment to so the immediate neighbors, I think that's like within 100 feet of it or something, so it's just gonna be 4 houses or so.
We might, like this is still kind of new for us as far as how we get this out to the neighborhood. We might extend it for the whole section of Foxglenn. I'd have to look at the guide again to see exactly the language, like if it's reserved just to the houses immediately adjacent or if we do the whole area for approval. I think it would lean more towards the ones that are immediately adjacent. And we would ask them like what they thought, because they'd be the ones who'd be most affected, especially the people losing the parking. And then based on those, if they are approved, I believe we need, I think, 60% approval, something around there. Then we would go forward with construction.
And you did, so this design or this invitation to the meeting tonight was sent out to the whole neighborhood?
It was, yes. All the emails that we got from the survey, we had sent it out to them last week. Yeah, so we tried to reach out to as many people as we could, but we didn't get as much participation as we would have liked.
So yeah, so we kind of broadly spread the message for this meeting to come and talk about this. And then the way the residential neighborhood traffic management program works is the folks that are immediately adjacent have the ability to agree or disagree with the project since they're so impacted potentially being right adjacent to it.
Okay, yeah, full disclosure, I live on Foxglenn, like a block north of this or whatever. And I've been out of town, so I haven't gotten through all my emails yet, but I didn't see an email about it. And I know there are a lot of passionate people, so I'm surprised that nobody would have showed up.
I heard from some of the neighbors who just had other things going on today, and I told them I'd give them a summary of what we learned tonight. But yes, I'm also surprised that we didn't have more of a turnout.
So barring, thank you, fellow commission members, for all of your input. Overall, I think it looks good. It seems like it'll have minimal impact to overall traffic impedance, but hopefully it's enough to slow things down. And it's nice to be able to go directly to construction. So instead of, having to take the steps and the iterations otherwise. So yeah, I guess I look forward to what those comments might be and getting the support we need to move forward with this.
Thank you. Sounds good. Yeah, with that, I suppose I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Do we go to public comment now?
Do we have any public people here? Yeah.
We had a couple, but I think they've all dropped off.
Okay, so not hearing any public comment. Yeah, any further comments from commissioners or? Not hearing any. Thanks for the presentation, David.
Thank you.
You're back.
I'm back. Yes, I couldn't help myself. New guy. Yep. So thank you, Chair Koenig and Transportation Commission for this second opportunity. Now we're going to wrap things up. I know it's been a pretty action-packed meeting with the crash report. Let me go to presentation mode. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the crash report. You should have gotten a copy in the email from Jeff. I'm going to be going over some high-level information that we got from the report and take you through what we learned. So this is the third crash report created by the city. It's our annual report each year. I think it gets better and we learn more about what's happening within the city, and we're able to use that data to try to make changes to our infrastructure. This report has a study period from 2019 to 2023, so it's the last 5 years of available data, which is pretty standard when people do crash analysis. They usually look at the last 5 years of available data. The crash data was gathered from the Arizona Crash Information System, which houses all the data, all the police reports from City of Flagstaff Police, Department of Public Safety, the county, all within the city limits. And this annual report is used to understand crash patterns within the city, identify areas that warrant further investigation, and recommend crash mitigation strategies. The data that was analyzed to determine crash statistics include crash severity, which is related to injury, if they're minor injuries, all the way to serious injuries or fatalities, collision types, time of day, demographics, and crash locations, just to name a few. So I'm going to go through some at-the-glance statistics that we learned from the report. This is just showing total crashes in the city per year since 2012 to 2023, and we are seeing a general trend downwards, which we are grateful for. You'll see in 2020 there was a big decline because of COVID-19, but after that we've been basically back to where we were before. Our serious injury crashes, we typically have about 30 serious injury crashes a year. These also seem to be trending downward, at least in the 5 years of data that we analyzed. Our fatal crashes, we typically have an average of 8 fatal crashes per year. And the serious and fatal crashes make up about 2% of the total crashes that occur within the city. This is just another one, crashes by age range. This is one that I always think is kind of interesting. 18 to 25 accounted for the largest portion of crashes at 26%. I don't have the graphic, but when we looked at severe crashes, they also accounted for the largest majority in those crashes as well, serious and fatal. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to my good friend Chris, and he will be talking about the high injury network.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Chris Fair, and I'm a transportation planner here with the city. I'm going to take us through 2 analyses that were included in the crash report, the first of which is the high injury network. To determine which corridors within the city of Flagstaff repeatedly host high severity crash incidents, a high injury network analysis was conducted. This was completed by dividing the major roadway network within city limits and evaluating which segments hosted crash incidents with severe injuries. For our purposes, severe injuries include serious injuries and fatal crashes. This tool is useful for identifying roadway segments that are repeatedly involved in high severity crashes and therefore should receive efforts for safety mitigation. There's a few ways to represent the results of this work. This representation includes segments that hosted 3 or more crash incidents across the city's network. To review the classes that are included here, orange segments represent segments that hosted 3 to 5 crash incidents. Red is 6 to 8, and the darkest color hosted 9 to 12 crash incidents. As you can predict, our higher volume roadways show up pretty heavily here, and those efforts certainly are worthy of safety mitigation. And it's also important to highlight the lower volume roadway segments that still show up in this representation. There are 34 segments that pop up when you display roadway segments with 3 or more high severity crashes or crash incidents. That's 34 of 304 that were included in the entire major roadway network. And these segments account for 60% or around 60% of all the high severity crash incidents that occurred during that time. The next analysis was an assessment of crash rates across the city to determine which corridors and intersections within the city host high rates of crash incidents. 2 analyses took place, the first of which investigated major intersections around the city and determined the number of crashes per 1 million vehicles entering that intersection. The second analysis investigated roadway segments to determine the number of crashes per 1 million vehicle miles traveled on a given segment. It's important to note that in development of these crash rates, the volumes were taken from the cities or from the Flagstaff region's transportation demand model. A current limitation of the transportation demand model is it can struggle to produce accurate estimates of all lower volume roadways. So when you review these results, engineering judgment should be used. City staff reviewed the results of these analyses and chose a few to highlight. We don't need to dive into each and every one of these, but as far as just working through these charts, for instance, in the top chart, that these are our intersection-based crash rates, and these are a few of the intersections that rose to the top. For instance, Forest Meadows and Beulah, when we did our analysis, we captured 60 crashes that were intersection related that happened here. And it's compared against a entering vehicle volume of 22,000 per day. So 22,000 vehicles entering that intersection per day. And that yields our crash rate. And then in the bottom, we can highlight the Elm Avenue roadway segment, which hosted 7 non-intersection related crashes along the segment, and compared with its volume of roughly 1,300 cars per day, yielded a crash rate that we believe warranted putting it on this list. So this is a good tool for us to guide our early efforts in identifying areas around the city where higher crash rates are occurring. And with that, I will pass it back to David.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we're really excited to have the crash rates this year compared to just the frequencies that we've looked at in the past. It's been a big help from Chris to be able to use the model to get those volumes. That's something that we didn't have in the past or didn't have as much access to. And as we're getting more access to it, we're excited to be able to use them to identify places that might have lower volumes, but still higher amount of crashes, to see if those are places that we can make changes to have an impact. Still an ongoing process, things that we're trying to learn, but I think we're getting closer and closer to perfecting it each time we go through this process. So next, I want to talk about road safety assessment. This is kind of something that was derived from the last reports from the last high injury network. It was actually at the Transportation Commission meeting that we noticed that East Route 66 and Highway 89 hosted a large amount of severe incidences, and Transportation Commission directed us to try to find a way to figure out what's going on there, try to find a way to address those issues. And so I got to give a lot of credit to Chris because he thought that we should go for a road safety assessment on this area. At the time, ADOT had just finished one on Milton Road, and a road safety assessment is administered through ADOT. They hire a consultant to go and evaluate the section of roadway to develop mitigation strategies for the city or whoever they're asking to do the analysis. And we figured what better way to learn more about what's happening here and to try to find a way to find a solution than to hire people who it's their job to go and do this. And so Chris, and supported by the rest of us, submitted for a road safety assessment through ADOT, and we were awarded the road safety assessment, and it is ongoing and should conclude at the end of the fall season, or at least with their assessment. I don't know for sure when we'll actually get our report back that says, okay, like here's what's happening, here's the recommended mitigations, but we are looking forward to getting those results. Next thing I want to touch on is this year we did something different in the report where we went from a high level analysis of like citywide data and zeroed in on specific segments that we did a more in-depth dive on to try to understand more of what's happening. We actually referenced the previous report because we identified places that we thought deserved further investigation, and those included the 3 that are shown: Woodlands Village Boulevard between Forest Meadows and Beulah Boulevard, Fort Valley Road between Forest Avenue and Mead Lane, and Country Club Drive and Solier intersection. So we went to each of those locations and used the data from our current crash report to see what's happening, to see if there's any patterns that we can identify, things that we could change. And we did. We did find things at each of these that we wanted to change. At Woodlands Village Boulevard, we noticed that there were several pedestrian-related crashes at Forest Meadows and Woodlands Village Boulevard, and we wanted to understand more of why that's happening. This process definitely has steps to it. So like now that we've identified it, the next step is to get the crash reports, which we haven't done yet, but we do intend to try to figure out if that's something we can change. Fort Valley Road on Forest Avenue, we noticed that there was several bicycle-related incidences, and we went and visited the site. We found that there were sight distance issues with the vegetation, so we went ahead and trimmed some of that back to help improve sight distance on that parallel path for vehicles as they enter Fort Valley. And at Country Club in Solier, we found that there was more than the majority of crashes occurred during the nighttime, and it actually does not have enough streetlights to meet our standards. So our intention is to bring it up to our standards and to make sure that all the streetlights are sufficient in hopes of preventing more nighttime related crashes. In our current edition of the report, we've identified 2 new areas that need further analysis, which we're still getting the timing down for these reports. My intention is to work with our intern, transportation technician, Sydney, to research these areas, just like we did with the other ones, do a more in-depth investigation to try to learn more about them and try to find more mitigation measures. So next, I just want to touch on projects that are supported by the report, like what we've learned from the report and how the projects that we are doing are supported by the data. So first one, of course, is East Route 66 and Highway 89 RSA. We know that there's a lot of issues there, and we're excited to have opportunity to learn more about them and to come up with solutions. Like if we hadn't done the crash report, we wouldn't necessarily have known how the situation that was going on there and wouldn't have given it this sort of attention. The next one is Highway 89 and Smoke and Rise signal rebuild. It's one that we're currently working on with a consultant to get redesigned. And we had known, like from citizens calling us, that there's issues at this intersection. We had known that there's concerns about the left turns, and there were a handful of crashes that supported that. So we thought, okay, let's rebuild it. And even in this last year, there were more severe incidences related to left turns, which even more reinforces the idea to rebuild it, redesign it to prevent those sorts of crashes. Another one that was kind of born from the report, on Highway 89, we submitted an HSIP grant for streetlights, missing streetlights on that section of roadway. We looked at it together after it had been identified through the report and found that there was also a good amount of crashes that occurred during the nighttime, and the streetlights do have a crash modification factor to reduce those crashes. So we went ahead and applied for it. We'll find out soon if we were awarded that grant. Country Club and Solier Avenue intersection streetlights, talked about that one, also derived from this report, and the Fort Valley Road and Mead Lane site distance project where we went and removed that vegetation. So just going through the report, it is giving us direction on places where we can go to try to make significant improvements to improve the safety in the city. Finally, I just want to touch on some future report items. Our next goal, and this is something I'm also going to work with our transportation technician on, is compare our trends to national and sister city trends. It's one thing for us to understand, oh, like we have this many nighttime crashes, we have this many rear ends. But if we can compare it to what's happening on a national level or at other places that are similar to Flagstaff, it can help us understand if we're in the norm, if we're kind of outliers, if there's things that stand out that we might want to address more. We want to refine our crash rate volumes from the model. We found this year that using all the volumes yielded some results that weren't reliable, that some of the, like Chris said, some of the smaller streets didn't have the most reliable volumes. So our goal is to try to refine which volumes we use to make sure we only use the ones that we're confident in, and then create a comprehensive analysis of the identified locations. So the 2 locations we found, which were Ponderosa Parkway and Butler intersection, and a section of 4th Street. Our intention is to do another analysis of those and have that submitted as well. And with that, I'll leave it open to discussion.
Thanks, David and Chris. We'll open it up to any commissioners, or I see Councilmember McCarthy would like to make comment as well.
Should I go ahead? I just might report what a discussion we had at City Council just last night. It's not really directly related, but it is kind of related in that there's been a lot of fatalities of basically people standing in front of trains or trying to walk across in front of trains or whatever and getting killed. And so one of the council members asked that the city manager to maybe bring that back to us. I don't know if that'll come to you guys or not, but about to see if there's anything that can be done to reduce the number of fatalities between, pedestrians and the train. I'm not really asking you to do anything. I'm just kind of a heads up.
We were given a heads up a couple days ago. And Christine Cameron is doing the downtown mile and some of the other projects near the railroad tracks. And so Christine and I are putting together a memo for city council. So I can give you a sneak preview. We have the downtown mile project, which is probably a couple years out from construction, but that involves, Trevor mentioned downtown mile. So it involves Beaver Street and San Francisco Street. We're adding pedestrian gates on the wrong way traffic, if you will, because right now there's vehicle gates on the vehicle side, but there's no gates on the ped side, on the wrong side for pedestrians. So we're adding ped gates and some adjacent fencing. We're doing the same thing at Ponderosa Parkway because there's the Foots Trail that doesn't have a gate. There's no fencing, so even if there is a gate, you can walk right around it. So we're adding some fencing and ped gates at Ponderosa Parkway, and Fanning has a similar project with ped gates on the wrong sides and fencing. We also have a rail safety plan that is about 30% done. That's in conjunction with the BNSF. So we're working on stuff.
I love it when I ask a question and staff is right on it already.
We'll have a memo out in the next couple of days for council, and then we'll probably add it. We have IGAs going to council on October 15th for the Ponderosa Parkway project and the Fanning project, because those are Section 130 rail safety grants. So we'll talk about that in 2
So
weeks.
anything new on the getting rid of the train horns at some of these intersections? Like we have a quiet zone at Beaver and San Francisco, and people are asking me about the, to the east, those intersections. Is that related, or is that like a whole separate thing?
So that's also part of my memo update. The Federal Railroad Administration is aware of our number of recent crashes. And in other cities that have had kind of this serious crash, they've pulled their quiet zones from the whole city. So I'm working with FRA to try to not let that happen to us, but it happened to Phoenix, Oceanside, and San Diego in the past year. So it's serious. In fact, it's amazing. The Federal Railroad Administration contacted me the day after each of these crashes. They're very aware of what's going on and concerned as we.
There are some times when it's actually safer that they have a quiet zone, because then if the train engineer sees someone like near or on the track, they can hit the horn, and then people will look. And I know of one incident where I think it was Adam Shimoni was standing like on one of the tracks, and he heard, the warning, and didn't think anything of it, because it's like, well, I see the train, not realizing that there's two tracks and there was a train coming on the other one. So if then the horn of the train engineer hit the horn, and then he jumped and got out of the way, and he's still walking.
I have a couple of questions. So I think in the grand scheme of things, the nice thing is that Flagstaff is a relatively safe city. Like we don't have a lot of deaths or severe crashes. Although it does make analysis difficult when you're looking for trends. And do you guys have any thoughts on what some of the leading causes of that contribute to severity that could be looked at as like a stage 2 thing, so that in this, where we only have 9 data points, if it's right on red, or if it's the side swipe or whatever those might be that wind up leading to high severity, that you could sort of target those as a second stage for remediation.
There are a few things that stand out when we look at the fatal crashes. Typically, the largest portion of them are made up by vulnerable users or pedestrians, usually make up 30% of the fatalities. The other aspect is that alcohol is usually involved in the fatal and serious injuries, also at about a rate of like 30% of them. But from this level, like of the crash report, from the high level where we see, okay, where they're occurring and all this, like you said, like they are kind of spread it out and a little bit more random. We don't, or at least I don't think we know enough to make substantial changes until we choose certain locations and look at them specifically and take the crash reports, like be it like all of the fatal crash reports that occurred in this one section, read them and see exactly what happened. Because it could say like a left turn, but it might be a left turn from a driveway. It all just kind of depends. There's so much more data when we get down to the actual crash reports. So I'd say we know now like where they're occurring. We've known that from the like the last few reports. We're starting to zero in on the places that need more attention, like with the RSA at Highway 89. I think our stage 2 is kind of this more in-depth analysis at these specific locations. I can't think of something that we could do like citywide that would address them all because they're all so specific to their specific situations. But that's my take on it. I might look to Jeff to see if he has anything else to add.
No, I think you did a good job. Yeah, their fatalities are infrequent, fortunately, and spread out. And as you go through like a year's worth of reports, it tends to be every single one was unique. It was like, oh my God, this thing happened in this set of circumstances. They don't really follow any kind of pattern at this point. But that's a good suggestion that we could look at. As we're now in our third year, so we're starting to gather a lot more information than we used to have, and we could spend some time with that. But yeah, it's all over the place. It's really, yeah, really dispersed.
Yes. And I do want to point out one place where we have made a significant change. I've talked about it in the past, but at Marketplace Drive and Highway 89, oh, sorry. We did see like a pattern there, severe left turn incidences, fatal incidences, fatal or a lot of serious injury left turn incidences. So we changed the left turn phasing to protected only, and we've seen a huge difference. Like in the report, it details it like all the way, but we I think effectively eliminated all the left turn fatal and serious injury crashes and reduced the number of crashes total at that intersection. I don't think we had any intersection related serious or fatal injuries since the change was made in 2019 at Marketplace. So that's just one example of like a site specific place where we're able to make a change and see results. And I think that's what will be the future for us making changes in Flagstaff, is that they will have to be site specific. There could be like probably the most impactful thing we could do on a like a big scale for the city, I think would be education. Like I know that the biggest age range is 18 to 25. And that's a little bit outside of our realm in engineering. But for what it's worth, I think if we did do some sort of further education for people, like, I don't know, have driver's ed be a thing at all the high schools. I don't know if it is right now, but things like that, maybe that would have an impact. But that's the most that I can think of as far as like a citywide thing that could be effective.
Jeff, along those same lines of having the protected left turn and then approving the outcomes there at that intersection, do you have any data on the flashing yellow yield turn signal? I'm not sure what you'd call it, versus just having a green light that says yield to oncoming traffic. Is there any data that shows that improved safety?
Yes, Commissioner Cruikshank, I can jump in on that one. We do have data along Beulah and Lake Mary. If you've been in that area, along Beulah at like Forest Meadows, Woodlands Village Boulevard, and Lake Mary Road and McConnell, we have the flashing yellow arrows. Those have been there for quite a long time. And when I did the analysis, I do wonder if, because I believe we made the change in 2015 to go to the flashing yellows, that since it's been installed, like we've had so much growth in those areas, that's hard to discern exactly how these have impacted the left turns. But I'll give you a rundown of what I found. So at McConnell, which I believe was in permissive left before the flashing turns were installed, we saw a big improvement. We saw that the left turn crashes were reduced. And this mitigation strategy, the flashing yellow arrows, are the crash modification factor is a reduction of 15%. So it's not astronomical. It's not like a huge amount, but it is enough that we think it's worthwhile to install. At the other areas, at Lake Mary, when we did the flashing yellow, the crashes increased, but we believe that's because we took it from a protected left to a flashing yellow arrow permissive left. I do want to say that at all those intersections, I don't believe we've had a lot of severe incidences. I want to say that I don't think we've had any, but I'd have to double check. But so the crashes that are occurring are usually minor. But I would say, to answer your question, the flashing yellow arrows do have an effect, but it's a small one. It's that 15% reduction. And it is a balancing act. Like at certain intersections, we want to try to improve the efficiency as much as we can. So we lean more towards permissive lefts. At other ones, if the geometry is challenging to navigate in a safe way, like if you think of Marketplace, it's a very large intersection with median islands, so it's hard to make that left safely. So we thought that the safety was more important there than the efficiency. But there's other places where the intersections are smaller, and we think that people can safely navigate a left turn with a flashing yellow arrow with gaps in the traffic. So it's all a balance.
Okay. Are there plans to put the more flashing yellow left turn signals in the city? Because I personally like those. I think it draws more attention to the fact that you have to yield there. I lived 6 months up in Canada in 2011, and every signal up there in Vancouver was like that. So I think maybe having those more as the norm would be an improvement.
That's generally our plan as we rebuild things. If it's a permissive left and going to stay a permissive left, we go with the flashing yellow arrow.
Excellent.
Yeah, the public works guys just don't have the crew to go out and change things out that are still working, unfortunately. But yeah, as we change things up and modernize things, that's generally where we're headed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Is there any feed forward process on like fatal crashes where you guys, once the report comes out, you guys go over it, or you just kind of like go through it once a year?
Right now, we're doing so we get the data, so the police department turns it into the state, and the state kind of uploads data, I think twice a year at this point. So once we get a full, and it's usually lagging 3 or 4 months. So once we get a full year's worth, these guys download data and start going through it for the annual crash report. One of the things that we put, I think in the ATMP, and we may have put it in the crash report as well, and other agencies do this, is just what you're saying. When there's, they're so infrequent and spread out that it doesn't always tell you a lot. But some agencies, yes, when there's a fatality, the police department notifies the engineering department, and we take a look right away to see if there's something that could be fixed quickly. And that's something we put in, long story circular there, but that's something we did put in the ATMP and maybe in the crash report. That's something we'd like to develop, that relationship with the police department, and make that more standard practice here. So, yep. Good suggestion. We'd like to do it, and it's on the list.
Any other questions from the commission before we go to public comment?
Yes, Chair, this is Matt Eckhoff. David, if I missed it, I apologize. Plans along the Fort Valley corridor for pedestrian crossing. I know Cedar still has, turning left from Cedar on to Fort Valley still has a temporary left turn sign after, a couple of years with a sandbag holding it down. Are there plans at that intersection for improving pedestrian safety, given, a number of, near misses, which certainly don't, hit the data elements for, moderate or severe crashes and fatalities, but curious if there's something in the hopper along that corridor to improve safety?
There's a number of things that are kind of in the works coming out of that US 180 corridor master plan. One of them is a pedestrian actuated crossing at Forest. And then I think there's 2 pedestrian islands that are out there. I think Mead Lane, and there is another, I'm not quite sure the location of it. But your question about Forest Avenue, yeah, we restricted left turns to improve the pedestrian experience crossing Fort Valley. It is unfortunate it's been temporary that long, but it's generally working. I know people do violate it, but generally it's working. There isn't really a current status on that project. I know ADOT was trying to get it funded through their program. I know Martin has been trying to find a way to get that crossing funded through his program. Let me make a note so I can get you guys current information. I might just send an email out because I'm curious too where that's at. It seems like there's several people working on it, but I don't know that there's actual forward momentum at this point for Forest and 180. I'll get an update out to you by email.
Jeff, I can jump in if you want.
Oh, Martin's here.
With an update. Yeah, I'm here.
Even better. There you go.
So the 3 locations are Mead, as you mentioned, Forest, and the third one would be Whiting, or in that general vicinity. Forest would be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, likely. Mead and Whiting would be just simply median islands, like concrete median islands, to give people a safe place to cross to. All 3 of those locations are part of the First Mile, Last Mile grant program. So we are between 30% and 60% plans. We intend to go to construction next year. Hopefully these crossings will be part of one of the early phases of construction. So hopefully next year, but that's yet to be determined.
Excellent. Thank you guys for that update.
Any public comment? Any final comments from commissioners? Thank you so much, David and Chris, and all the staff that helped you on that. I really support and appreciate the rate-based analysis. And so I think that's very interesting. In your report, you have a lot of graphs of time of day and age and some of these other kind of things. And it'd also be interesting to have a sort of rate-based analysis for that. If you're going to put a graph up, like, well, we know they happen on Fridays. Is that because we have more vehicle miles being driven on Fridays? Or is that just because whatever social ideas you want to have about people being in a rush trying to get home from work? Yeah, and so like a rate-based comparison for those could be interesting. And yeah, I'm glad to hear you guys are thinking about trying to add in some sort of feed-forward mechanism for, fatal accidents. Likely it is limited that there's an immediate traffic thing that could be done, but since there are so few of them, it's less of a burden than if we were getting more of them. And then the one other comment, I know a lot of these pedestrian ones are difficult because they're crossing at non-pedestrian facilities and there's not great lights and some of those things, but I think it just helps to point out the benefit of providing better pedestrian facilities that meet people where they are. Unfortunately, ADOT loves to do this thing where they put 3 crosswalks at an intersection and leave the 4th one out. And then people are just going to cross that one still. And so, yeah, just, the more places we can add them to meet what the common person would be doing and what makes their life easier, not requiring them to walk some extra distance or do a couple extra laps around some intersections, I think is the sort of thing that can help with some of those.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
So it looks like no old business. So just kind of concluding stuff.
Yeah, we have the usual links to ped and bike committees on here. And then informational items, commissioner discussion, and Boulder Point Woodland Drive traffic calming. Did you have a slide for that or no? You're gonna just do verbal? Okay, perfect. So maybe I'll let David come back up and do that one. And then I can talk about the next agenda.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Of course. One more time. Thank you, Chair Koenig and commissioners. So real quick, I have an update for Boulder Point Woodland Drive traffic calming. We completed the project. We accepted the improvements. We went out and did a speed study after the fact now that they're in place. What we found was at Woodland Drive between the circles, the 85th percentile had dropped from, I believe, 30 miles per hour to 26 miles per hour in the 85th. I believe the average was around 20 or 21 miles per hour. So a significant decrease, closer to, I think, what the neighborhood was envisioning as far as a more comfortable street. On Boulder Point, we saw very similar results between those two circles. The 85th had dropped from 32 miles per hour in the 85th to 27 miles per hour in the 85th. So we're really encouraged by that. It's challenging to lower vehicle speeds in these neighborhoods, and we were encouraged that the circles had those good results. We did a study further away from the circles that the speeds hadn't been affected as much the further away you got. And at one spot, we found that the 85th had only dropped by a mile per hour as once you leave the circles, which we anticipated. We knew that like traffic calming projects, like you need to space them closely and you need to have them every like couple hundred feet for them to be totally effective the whole way. And so that did reinforce like that idea that, okay, like we would have to have these all over the place to be able to slow speeds effectively the entire length. And so something that we're going to take forward into these other projects and try to understand, okay, like how much can we really affect like on these streets and what's the best way to address those. But overall, we were really encouraged with the results at both of those locations. And I think the circles can be a good measure at other places. I think they probably work best at four-legged intersections is something that we found through this experience. We can make them work at the three-legged ones with the curb extensions, but it's just more expensive. So a lot of lessons learned, and we're grateful to have the project completed.
Moving along down the agenda, we already had City of Flagstaff Regional Plan on your December 4th agenda, so that's in good shape. And then residential traffic management, traffic calming discussion just in general. We have a number of devices like circles and chicanes and all these different things in the engineering standards. We're not using a bunch of them, and maybe there are some that we want to use that are not in the standards. So we want to talk about that. And then now that we've been through a couple of neighborhoods, David has some ideas of updating that residential traffic management program guidelines again. We just did it. It's probably been 2 years though. So anyways, that's what that agenda item is. We'll get that as ready as we can for December. And that's it for now, but you never know. That's all we have tonight.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Any commissioner discussion or comments at all? If not, does anybody have a motion?
I make a motion to end the meeting. Adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance.
Thanks, everyone.